My name is Alexandre Pacheco da Silva. I am a professor at FGV Direito SP. I'm here with Professor Nathan Cambien from University of Antwerp, who is here with us this week to teach a short-term course on EU regulation of digital technologies, the Digital Markets Act and Artificial Intelligence Act, as a part of the school's Global Law program. Nathan Cambien is an associate professor specializing in EU law and competition law and a member of the legal service of the EU Commission. He holds a Magister Juris degree from University of Oxford and a PhD in law from the KU Leuven. Thanks again to be a part of this project. Nathan, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. So, Nathan, I have three questions for you today. The first one is about the course in students' interaction. Can you actually explain a little bit about the program that you taught during this week and about the interaction that you had with the students? How were the students during your classes, and what were the things that you discussed with them?
So thank you very much for the warm welcome today and the rest of the week. So it was a real pleasure to be here. Before I answer your question, of course, I will be answering them in my personal capacity and not the one of the institutions I am a member of. My class was about EU law and digital. So we discussed the EU's approach to the digital sector. First, in a more general way, what are the values of the EU? What are the approach and the rights and fundamental rights, values that the EU wants to really put emphasis on in the digital world? And then we focused on two of such acts, two very important acts, I believe. One was the DMA, or Digital Markets Act, and the other one was the AI Act. And we discussed the EU's attempt, because they're very recent acts, at regulating those fields, how they play out, what are the open questions, how we can maybe resolve them, whether it should be inspiring maybe other countries or not, what are the problems on a more global level or the opportunities. So I had a great interaction with the students. I must say it was a very interesting group, not only because they were keen on interacting, they were motivated, but also because of their background. I found it very interesting to see they had different backgrounds in terms of professional experience. Some already have some experience at law firms. Some actually are not lawyers but come from the business schools. Some are from different nationalities. We had from the US, we had from Asia. So it was a very interesting group to discuss these topics which affect all of us. All of us are using those networks, platforms, apps, have our own opinions about them, but I think most of the students agreed we need to regulate to some extent. And then we had interesting discussions as to how far should we go, where should we put the emphasis on. Some students were actually saying, well, it's very important, this privacy-driven approach, fundamental rights approach, but there was some concern expressed by others that we should not over-regulate. So there's the balance here that we need to achieve. And then I had I learned a few things myself, talking to them about the Brazilian experience, where Brazil does some very interesting things also in this field, and where I think I got some inspiration. So it was actually very good in terms of interaction with the students.
That's great. So one specific topic that I want to actually discuss with you and hear from you, it is about the position of the regulator and the challenge to deal with digital markets. So one of your areas of expertise concerns the role of regulators, and particularly, of course, in European Union. And the digital market evolves rapidly. It's hard to actually follow all of the changes and trying to catch up the things that are happening in those markets. New business model, new platforms, new forms of data use. So given this constant transformation, is it realistic to expect regulators to remain fully up to date with technological change? Because for me, and dealing with the students and trying to answer this class after class, I feel that this is challenging. I imagine that this person that is in this position of a regulator trying to catch up day after day, how could you explain to us the challenges of this position and maybe strategies to catch up?
Excellent question, and of course I fully agree with you. It's a field which is very rapidly evolving at a pace which is in a way unseen, and so in a way it will be always the position of the regulator will always come after, but that I think in itself is not new. Every time new technologies arrive, you can think of the cars where they used actually to apply the rules for horse carriages, or when the new digital world online sales happened, also the contract law had to be adapted, and many examples of that the regulator comes after. And it has to be logically, because if the technology is not there, you cannot regulate it. So that in itself is not new. What I think is different indeed is the pace at which this develops. The pace and the scope. It's really going to be everywhere, AI for instance, but also the digital platforms. So they have a very large impact in different fields. So it's really a large scope, and the evolution happens very rapidly. So I think that should not put the regulator off, and should not mean that the regulator cannot do anything. I think what the regulator in the EU, for instance, tries to do is find a way to deal with these challenges. And one way of doing this is by having open-ended norms. For instance, in the Digital Markets Act, the way or the technology you use is not necessarily the most relevant. What you have to do is respect certain rights. For instance, keeping open competition by not self-preferencing, allowing interconnecting devices and software. Whether these devices and software develop, it will still be the same norms. So I think there is a way to accommodate it to some extent there. There's also flexibility, which I think is very important. The regulator has to be able to adapt, has to be able to steer, specify, we sometimes say, so it has to come up with new rules in function of the new technology. In the AI Act, I also think they're quite open-ended norms, but there's also really provision to make sure that there is a possible update, there's a dialogue with the people in the sector. So I think that is one way of accommodating it, making sure it's sufficiently open-ended, flexible, and open to talking to people and the people in the business to make sure that this can actually work. So I think that is a challenge. Of course, the challenge is to make sure that the norms also allow innovation. And that's why, for instance, the AI Act allows for these regulatory sandboxes, making sure that there is actually scope and room for improving, that the rules should be adapted but should not suffocate. So that is, I think, very important. So I believe, yes, there is going to be a pacing problem, but I hope that the way that the EU has done it actually allows to accommodate for this.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Definitely. And one final question that I have for you today, it is mainly about law schools and legal education and this environment that we have, that nowadays not only professors are using technology to prepare their materials, especially AI, but also the students are becoming heavy users of this technology, not only for fun, but also to actually deliver their papers, the exercises that they needed to actually do. So my question for you is, in this environment that is suffering a profound transformation, especially when we think the legal practice and the way that law firms, legal departments, courts are also hiring, internalizing all of those tools and companies that provide those tools to them, how do you, in a way, see this environment changing, and what would be your say for a student nowadays that it is entering a law school, a little bit anxious, a little bit afraid that he or she will not have the same opportunities that, for example, their parents in the past, or also what they needed to learn to become a lawyer in this new environment? What would be the skills? What would be the knowledge that they needed to acquire when they enter a law school? What would you say for these students that are entering in the legal profession, seeing that we have a lot of technology that nowadays is a part of what it means to be a lawyer?
It's a very good question, a very tricky one, because, as I said, this is developing so rapidly, much more rapidly than anything we've seen in the past, presumably, so it's difficult to predict. But I would say to the student, I'm optimistic. Don't be afraid. Law is centered on human beings, and it will still be. Of course, our role may change, but I do think it is important to, first of all, acknowledge AI is there. We cannot ignore it. Some lawyers tend to be very traditionalist, try to keep the profession the way it was. I don't think that would work. Same for the law curriculum in universities. We need to make sure that AI plays a part in this. So we need to embrace it. The same with other technologies that we have embraced. Teaching now is already quite different, distance learning and so on, from what it was in the past. So the students, they need to embrace it. They need to know it's there. They need to also be guided, and I think that's important. They will use AI. I see this already. Students use AI, so the university has an important role there to make sure that it can guide them in using this in a good way, in a responsible way. It doesn't harm anyone, doesn't lead to fraud and so on, but also that their skills, which I believe will remain important, legal skill, analytical skills, not everything will be outsourced to AI. And so that we guide them in this, we supervise them. And it's a challenge, both in regards students, but also PhD researchers and so on. So the university has a role to play. I'm not saying that the university should become AI schools, all of them. There may be a course on AI, but I don't think that's a central bit. I think the central bit is to show to the students how AI can play a role and how they can responsibly use them. I think once you go to a law firm, typically in my country, the big law firms, they have AI tools already. And when you start working there as a graduate, you will start learning, you get these courses, you will get the training on this. That I don't think should happen at a law firm, but they should be aware that this is now a thing. And the people there work, still there, they work in a different way, but they're still around. So I would be optimistic, but also not naive. I think that would be my final answer to the student. I would encourage them to still go to law school.
That's great. Thank you very much, Professor. It is a pleasure to hear this optimistic perspective, because if we want to actually inspire our students and thinking about how they could build a future in the law, I not only totally agree with your opinion regarding that subject, but I think it is a positive message to think that they have this opportunity to think about how they will create their own future and how they will actually transform the legal system. Thank you again to be a part of this project.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.